I'm Kevin Rudd. Today, I talk to Des Evans, former CEO of MAN Truck and Bus in the UK. Des, you've spent over 40 years in commercial vehicles, sales and marketing in the UK, including more than 2 decades with MAN Truck and Bus. Before that, you worked for 15 years for Mercedes. I'll leave it to yourself to talk about what you did in MAN, but whatever you did is deemed as a revolution in the service industry and has become the subject of numerous cases since then. In 2014, you were awarded the Motor Transport Service to Industry Award, and you were named as probably the single most knowledgeable and accessible CEO or MD in the UK truck industry. You were appointed honorary professor at Aston Business School in 2014, and you've been involved in the development of the Aston Centre for Servitization Research and Practice. You were awarded an OBE Highest British Order of Excellence for your services in 2016. You're now an advisor in the areas of service innovation, business transformation, and growth via service-based business models. You're very welcome, Des. Could you start with a summary of what you did there? And when was it?
If I can, yeah. I think my migration from Mercedes, where I had 15 fantastic years with Mercedes-Benz, to MAN was it was quite a I don't say a risk, but it was quite an interesting venture, shall I say, because MAN at the time were, although relatively well known for their diesel engines, were relatively small in terms of the truck manufacturing, the truck operations, certainly in the UK. I mean, they had a very small 2% market share, but they'd taken over the UK operation from Volkswagen, and they were about to introduce this brand new range of trucks, which they'd spent 7 years developing, and they'd spent over €1 billion bringing the truck to market. And I was invited to come and become their new sales director, and I thought it was quite an interesting challenge, along with other things, but it was quite an interesting challenge. And one of the biggest challenges really was, although this was going to be quite a remarkable new product, and in typical automotive, the automotive world is all very big at introducing new hardware. This was quite an exciting program, because we went from a mechanical truck to an electronic digital truck, and it was more by accident than anything else. We actually thought, wow, instead of just promoting this as the new piece of hardware, we could actually promote this as a new piece of software that included a truck, because having the electronic digital capability, we were able to provide the marketplace with a whole new whole life experience, and that was going to be our competitive advantage against the big competitors, Mercedes, Volvo, Scania. And we were either arrogant enough or stupid enough to think that we could compete. This was in 1993 when we first kicked it off. But by the year 2000, with this brand new state-of-the-art product, we could become a 10% player, or quadruple, quintuple our turnover, but we do it on the back of a service program, not as a typical sales program, and that's really what started us off. The first thing to do was to get the right team around us. So I managed to persuade a few of my colleagues from Mercedes to come and join us, and yeah, we spent 2 or 3 years not just analysing them, we were very clear about the market. But then once we decided that we wanted to go down the route of a service-based product launch, where we actually included the first 3 years service in the price of the truck, and instead of the typical approach of saying, here's the new hardware, here's the price, and for fleet operators, for multiple purchases, here's a discount, and we just didn't even get involved in the price argument. We actually got involved in a cost per kilometre or a cost per mile argument, and we actually then produced this. We called it the tip of the iceberg, where the truck was on top of the with an iceberg. 90% of the danger, as the captain of the Titanic will tell you, is below the surface. You can't see it, and it's the same with the truck. The actual purchase price of the truck represents 10% of the customer's operating profits.
10%?
Operating costs. So if we could manage, you can get the 10% discount off the truck, right, or another 10% discount off the truck. It'll affect the bottom line of the customer by 1%. But if you could get 10% improvement in the 90% of the other costs, you could improve the operator's profitability by 9%, which would in fact triple his current average bottom line profitability. So we did a lot of research around that, and we discovered that by taking this approach, we could actually have instead of having a transactional approach to the business, we had a consultative approach to the business. And so we changed the style of the messaging, the communication, but then we also changed the organization, because instead of going through a series of independent franchise dealers, we actually scrapped the whole sales organization and we went with the direct sales organization. In fact, we took all the franchise dealers to Meribel, a mountain range in the south of France, because once we got them on top of the mountain, they had to listen to the message. If we'd taken them to a hotel in London, they would have just walked out because they wouldn't have listened to the message. And that was one of the biggest things, is then once we decided on the approach, we then had to decide on, that was on the strategy, we then had to decide on the structure. And that was quite brave. It was, in some ways, it was quite hard actually to bring about that change. But to do all of this, you then had to go away from what was a command and control culture into a very collaborative, all in it together culture, where it was all about win-win. Not only did we have to provide a win for the customer in terms of improved profitability, we also had to provide a win for the dealer by improving their profitability, and we did that in spades. I mean, the typical dealer used to turn over £12 million a year, 8 million sales, 4 million after sales, and make 1%. If he was any good, he might make 1.5%. £120,000 bottom line. In the new organisation, because every vehicle we sold went out with a 3-year service contract, we suddenly massively increased the service base of the vehicle park, and the average turnover for the dealer was 6 million, but with a 6% return on sales. So, tripled his bottom line with reducing the working capital by half. I mean, it was, it sounds as if we were trying to do a multiplicity of things at the same time, but that's exactly what it was, and we created this whole new service culture where the customer satisfaction, customer criteria was at the front of everything that we did, and that just enabled us to sell more trucks. And we went from 2% to 4% to 8%, to 12%, and then in the big heavy truck sector, we became market leader with 20%, and then we landed the biggest contract in European truck history with the sale of 7,415 vehicles to the British Army, with a 20-year service contract. So yeah, I mean, it was a service-led sales strategy. It changed the structure of the company, it changed the structure of the dealer network, and it put us into a position where we became, one of the top 3, top 4 leading suppliers of commercial vehicles and services in the UK.
What was the trigger in your mind very early on? Did you have any model? Did you look at any other player in the market doing similar things?
No, absolutely. No, that was the point. There was no. The trigger, I'll tell you what the trigger was. We had this whole new electronic architecture on the truck that could give us all this data about engine performance, fuel performance, driver behavior. This was about a newology, a trucknology, and we then had to capture that in the form of business practice. And then when you included a service contract and you included that in the price of the truck, all of a sudden you've got a £60 million business on services, multiply that by 4 years, you had a £240 million business in front of you with a 30% margin, compared to selling a vehicle for €60,000 with a 3% margin. Where do you want to be?
So this new product, this technological advances, which was about now introducing connectivity to the hardware of the truck, then became the enabler for you. All of a sudden you realize, oh, I can receive all this data. What can I do with this data? So starting with the software and then data-driven changes, then you are dealing now with your new business models.
Yeah, the average volume of new vehicle sales was averaging 45,000 vehicles a year. The average turnover for that volume of vehicles was between 2.5 and 3 billion pounds a year. But that market also generated 2.5 to 3 billion in servicing. Not with a 3% margin, with a 30% margin. It meant that our parts turnover went from £10 million a year to £100 million a year. Our service contract business went from about £3 million a year to £60 million a year, guaranteed for 4 years. The service capability, that became the business model of the company that just happened to involve a bit of hardware.
Yes, and it's interesting. Peter Drucker, famous management scientist, says culture eats a strategy for breakfast. So do you the main challenge for you to start this program was to get the mindset right and to get a bunch of people that could implement this concept?
Yeah, and also to get people to take ownership of their job, to take ownership of their role in the business, to take responsibility. And then we set out really good rewards. We spent a lot of time and effort on training. We spent a lot of time on making sure we had the correct level of remuneration and recognition. We had a lot of recognition awards every year, and we spent a lot of time on training and education. We set up our own business school. So education, culture, that played a very big part in creating this business and keeping it fresh, keeping it ready for the future, future-proofing it, if you like.
It's interesting. The first thing you mentioned was to get the culture and the structure and people right. More often than not, when we talk to customers, they They need to transform their services, digitalization, so on and so forth. We realize people start with the technology, talking about technology. I need to buy a new software. What is the new software going to look like? This element, especially this element, change management, you want to call it, or people side of things, I believe is often underestimated. What is your take on that?
It's very difficult to change people. They have to change themselves. But it did require a lot of persuasion to get people on side. We had very clear goals, very clear processes, very clear strategies for who we wanted to deal with.
Apart from these organizational elements, did you face any other challenges? For example, with your customers outside your organization, with perhaps rules and regulations, if it was applicable? What were other challenges you faced?
Yeah, there were regulation challenges. Secondly was the profitability of dealership.
How about your customers? Was it easy to convince them?
Well, we changed a lot of the customers. We attracted all sorts of customers. We were able to go to big supermarkets, the Tesco's of the world, who before would never bother with us. We were able to go into the hazardous goods business. We became market leader in the supply of petroleum vehicles, for instance. One of the biggest successes was with DHL. They had all their own workshops. They run 8,000 vehicles in the UK now. They're the biggest transport operator outside of the post office. They don't run a single workshop anymore. We took over the workshops. We put in-house workshops. We took over, so we then got guaranteed servicing, guaranteed parts supply. You know, it was a completely service-led proposition.
I was thinking to ask this question, and you already answered my question. Because when you have service-based business, it means you have more services to be delivered, which requires more service delivery capability, more legs and arms through a network of partner or dealers.
It was a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way, because we know that the average truck needs 50 hours of servicing a year by law. Somebody has to do it. And we just wanted to make sure that we did it. And we grew an army of technicians in 70 workshops. We ended up with 1,300 technicians. And that was the differentiator. That was, the customers became so linked to you, they couldn't not stop buying you. There had to be a bloody big reason for them to stop dealing with you. You know, it sort of ring-fenced you from all the competition. By having a perfect service system, you put the competition outside. It's very difficult for them to get in. And from that, we then built up a database of hundreds, thousands of customers, thousands of vehicles. We had a 10 billion kilometer database on just about every truck application, how many miles they'd driven, what fuel consumption they'd achieved, how we categorized the drivers. Oh, today, we can tell you how many metric tons of CO2 each fleet is producing. I can tell you on a fridge van that's got 42 roll cages of frozen food in it, yeah, how many times the door of that fridge is opened and closed, what's the ambient temperature in it, and whether it's maintaining the legal standards.
Wow.
Yeah.
What you say now, it's amazing. And it's interesting because even today, like let's say a decade after your time there, these things in many areas and in many industries are classified as new or the way forward in the future. What do you think?
One, it challenges their current business model. Two, you need to have a very, very organized field service operation. We had very few customer complaints because we were dealing with the complaints before they even happened. It's all about people, all about having the right people.
Do you think what you did is applicable to other industries? Yes.
Any industry,
Why?
any industry.
Any industry. Are there any factors to be considered before moving towards this model?
Well, the most important thing is to establish what are the critical success factors for your customer. It came down to two things, which was remarkable. Uptime, and the other factor was fuel consumption. So, uptime, fuel. We organized our whole operation on managing those two things. And in return, we were able to say to the customer, we understand everything about your operation. And what we're going to do, we're going to help you 50% improvement on your profitability. And if you work with us, we'll double your bottom line profitability. And if we really work together, we'll treble it. And this is what we did.
How do you see service management looking like in 2030, for example? And if organizations want to invest in service management processes and systems and business models, what would the three main areas that you would recommend?
The future of servicing is about service level agreements, delivering more than you promise, having an experience that is totally different from any competitor, that is immediate, that is 24/7, and that's with a human being. That's the perfect future of future servicing. There's very few people that can give fantastic service. This is the winner. But it's all about big data. And it's all about having the people and the processes that will enable you to really put yourself in the customer's shoes 24/7.
And this is going to change service from a cost center to a profit center.
Absolutely. Listen, nothing is a cost center in the future. It's either an investment center or a profit center. If it's costing you, stop it.
It's now July 2020. We've been dealing with this COVID situation, which disrupted a lot of businesses, a lot of supply chains, services, travel bans, and so on and so forth. How do you think this situation is going to change service management in particular?
Yeah, no, I think this has been a massive shock. I wish I had all the answers to this one. The two most valuable assets that you've got in any organization are your key customers and your key staff. And I think that's where I would start in bulletproofing or resilience testing your future. But it's a never-ending story, Kevin. It's the day you think you finished it, it's the day your competitors are going to come and steal your lunch.
Thank you very much. You're a gentleman and a scholar, and it was a great pleasure talking to you.